Hey everyone, welcome to the Formula for Success and Wealth, the channel that guides you on how to build financial stability and live smartly. Have you ever felt like, no matter how much effort you put into your work, you're still far from achieving what your parents did so easily? Ever wondered why owning a home seems out of reach today, while previous generations managed it with average salaries and less effort? In this video, we'll break down the numbers and look at what has actually changed across generations. Are today's youth truly careless with money and lazy, or are they battling a system that's become almost impossible to navigate? If you're tired of hearing that everything is your fault, but deep down know the math doesn't add up, stick around. The facts might shift how you think about money, career paths, and your financial future. The cost of living has soared to the point that younger generations now have 86% less purchasing power than baby boomers had in their 20s. Born between 1946 and 1964, boomers experienced a world where essentials like housing, vehicles, and education were far more accessible. Yet it's common to hear that younger people today are failing financially because of their poor habits or luxury cravings like avocado toast. There's always debate about whether today's youth are weaker than those of the past. But when we dive into the data, it becomes obvious. This isn't about laziness or being distracted by social media. It's about facing an economic system that's fundamentally harder. In 2022, the average millennial turned 33. At that time, the median home price in the US hit $433,000, while the average household income was roughly $70,000. If someone were to dedicate their entire income to buying a home, it would take over 6 years to pay it off. Of course, that's unrealistic, but it serves as a strong comparison tool. This price-to-income ratio is useful for understanding housing affordability. Back in 1988, when boomers were also around 33, the average house cost $110,000, and the typical household income was about $27,000, a 4-year salary equivalent. Some high earners could even buy a house with just a year or two of work. Historically, houses cost about 5 times the annual income of a family. During the housing bubble from 2006 to 2008, this ratio hit 7. Today, it has surpassed even that level. In the UK, the situation is even worse. The house price-to-income ratio has remained above 7 for more than a decade and recently exceeded 9, meaning average British citizens are in an even tougher spot than Americans when it comes to home ownership, and that's just part of the story. When you look at charts comparing average household income and the Case-Shiller Home Price Index, it's clear that between 1955 and 2005, income kept pace with or even outgrew housing prices. But since then, real estate values have surged, far beyond what most people earn. After the 2008 crash, prices dipped temporarily, but quickly rebounded and continued to skyrocket. Today, housing costs are well above what most can realistically afford. Another chart highlights the difference between general inflation and housing prices from 1970 to 2023. While the Consumer Price Index rose at a steady pace, home prices exploded. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a $100,000 home in 1990 would cost about $377,000 today. Meanwhile, the overall cost of living only rose to around $231,000 in that same span. In other words, home prices have far outpaced standard inflation. Part of the reason lies in demographics. Boomers faced less competition due to smaller population sizes, which meant less demand and lower prices. They also married younger, creating dual-income households earlier in life, making it easier to buy property. Today, millennials leave their parents' homes later, postpone marriage, and form families much later. Around 45% still don't live in homes they own, while previous generations had ownership rates between 69% and 85%. Education costs add another layer. college tuition is now outrageously high. Whether public or private, the average cost per year ranges between $30,000 and $50,000. Student loan debt has ballooned to over $1.7 trillion. From 1991 to 2021, tuition more than doubled, and the average student debt tripled, from $10,000 to over $30,000. Around 7% of borrowers owe more than $100,000. Worse still, a college degree doesn't guarantee a solid return anymore. Many degrees no longer lead to high-paying jobs, especially with the rise of alternative income sources like digital entrepreneurship. Even so, the number of graduates has surged by 250% since 1970, which means way more competition for a limited number of quality jobs. This heavily impacts the job market. Entry-level roles now demand prior experience, something that's difficult for newcomers. Starting salaries hover between $50,000 and $60,000, but many people struggle to even reach that. Millennials and Gen Z are entering adulthood in far more fragile economic conditions, heavier debt loads, lower wages, and a significantly higher cost of living. Gas prices alone are 40% to 60% higher than they were during boomers' youth. Car payments are also a major burden. The average monthly payment for a car is now $716, with loan terms averaging 69 months. This leads many into unsustainable debt, especially as interest rates climb. Credit card and auto loan debt have both reached record highs. When you factor in housing, education, transportation, rising living costs, constant digital distractions and social pressures, the result is a nearly unmanageable situation. Social and racial progress has undoubtedly been made, but economically, younger generations are at a steep disadvantage. Older generations often believe they had it harder, but data tells a different story. Today, 73% of millennials live paycheck to paycheck, as do 66% of Gen Z, making long-term financial planning extremely difficult. If you want to rent a home, the general rule is that it shouldn't exceed 30% of your gross income. This approach ensures that there's money left over for other essential expenses. Someone earning $50,000 a year should ideally spend no more than $100 per month on rent. In expensive cities like Boston and Seattle, this goal is almost out of reach. If this threshold needs to be exceeded, it's crucial to monitor other expenses much more closely. When buying a home, the same 30% rule applies to mortgage payments, insurance, and property taxes. For vehicles, the ideal scenario is to keep monthly payments under 10% of gross income. But this is becoming increasingly difficult, especially with current interest rates ranging from 8% to 13% on auto loans. That's why the best-case scenario is to buy a car outright if possible, and keep all other expenses within a manageable budget. Cutting back on spending is necessary, but saving and investing are just as important. One of the first steps is to contribute to a retirement account, such as a Roth IRA, which allows earnings to grow tax-free. The current annual contribution limit is $6,500. Just putting in $250 a month over 40 years can result in around $940,000. If you manage to invest $400 a month, the return can exceed $144 million. Contributing the maximum every year could grow that total to nearly $2 million. Another important factor is increasing income. One of the most effective strategies is to change jobs with some frequency. According to the Wall Street Journal, people who switch jobs tend to earn more than those who stay put. Even lateral moves often come with pay increases of 10% to 30%. Many tech professionals, especially in Silicon Valley, have adopted this strategy as a norm. They stay with a company for 1 or 2 years, then move to another with higher pay, pick up new skills, and continue advancing. After 10 years, they often find themselves in much higher positions and earning significantly more than if they had stayed in one place. Constant job hopping isn't for everyone, especially if you love your work and the environment is healthy. But if your finances are tight and there's no room to grow, it's a strategy worth seriously considering. Another harsh reality is the rising cost of education. In previous decades, college was financially attainable for most young people. Today, that's no longer the case. Tuition for both public and private universities has skyrocketed to staggering levels. A program that once cost around $10,000 annually in the 1990s can now easily exceed $50,000 per year. And that doesn't include housing, food, transportation, and textbooks. As a result, student debt has become an almost inevitable burden for anyone pursuing a degree. The US currently faces a student loan crisis exceeding $1.7 trillion. The average debt per student has tripled over the past few decades, climbing from about $10,000 to $30,000. Roughly 7% of borrowers owe more than $100,000. This severely limits young adults' ability to invest in property, save for retirement, or even start families. What makes this situation even worse is an increasingly competitive job market. Despite the number of college graduates increasing by 250% since 1970, job openings haven't expanded at the same pace. That means there are far more candidates competing for the same number of positions. Ironically, many entry-level roles now demand prior experience, something that logically shouldn't be expected from someone just entering the workforce. Starting salaries for recent grads hover around $50,000 to $60,000 annually, but many don't even reach that. Plenty of new graduates settle for lower-paying jobs just to get their foot in the door, all while managing high living costs and growing student loan balances. When it comes to transportation, cars present another significant challenge. Today, average car payments in the US are around $716 per month. Loan terms have also stretched out, now averaging 69 months. In nearly 6 years. Auto loan interest rates have surged too, often falling between 8% and 13%, which makes purchasing a car much more expensive than it was for baby boomers. All of this adds to growing consumer debt, especially on credit cards. With prices rising across the board, many people rely on credit just to maintain their lifestyle, even if it means paying high interest or digging deeper into debt. It's become a hard-to-break cycle. Social media and technology also play a role. Constant exposure to seemingly perfect lifestyles fuels a sense of comparison and dissatisfaction. Young people feel pressure to live up to standards that often don't match their financial reality. Many overspend just to maintain an image which only worsens their financial struggles. Despite these obstacles, it's still possible to take steps that help reduce the impact of generational inequality. One of the first actions is to track expenses and live within your financial means. A recent study found that 73% of millennials live paycheck to paycheck and 66% of Gen Z face the same issue. In other words, most people are in a fragile financial state with little room for emergencies or opportunities. One general guideline is that rent shouldn't exceed 30% of gross monthly income. This rule helps ensure there's enough left for essentials like food, healthcare, transportation, and entertainment. For example, someone earning $50,000 annually should ideally keep rent under $1,250 a month. But this is becoming increasingly difficult in major cities like New York, San Francisco, and Boston, where housing costs are through the roof. The same 30% rule applies to mortgage payments. If the total of your mortgage, insurance, and property taxes goes beyond that, the risk of falling into debt increases. For car payments, the advice is to stay under 10% of gross income. However, with current interest rates and car prices, that's a hard target for many to meet. One viable long-term solution for improving financial health is consistent investing. Contributing to retirement accounts like a Roth IRA allows funds to grow tax-free over the years. With just $250 a month invested for 40 years, assuming average market returns, it's possible to accumulate around $940,000. Raising that contribution to $400 monthly can increase the total significantly. If someone manages to reach the maximum allowed annual contribution, the final total can come close to $2 million. Changing jobs regularly is another method that can help boost income. According to data from the Wall Street Journal, professionals who switch employers frequently tend to secure higher salary increases than those who remain at the same company for extended periods. On average, a job change can result in raises of 10%, 20%, or even 30%. In the tech sector, especially in Silicon Valley, it's common practice for professionals to stay at a company for 1 to 2 years before moving on. This pattern often leads to faster career progression, new skill development, and higher pay over time. Even with all these opportunities, it's important to acknowledge that younger generations are entering adulthood at a disadvantage. They have less purchasing power, face stiffer job market competition, and must deal with rising expenses in housing, transportation, and education, all while living in a society that demands fast results. This isn't about laziness or lack of ambition. It's a reflection of deeper economic challenges. So when older generations claim that young people don't want to work or waste money on things like fancy coffee or avocado toast, it's necessary to understand that these are superficial takes. What's really at play is a system that requires significantly more effort to reach the same milestones that were once easier to attain. Still, there are ways to adapt, invest wisely, seek better income opportunities, and most importantly, learn to live within your means. The financial landscape has changed, and recognizing that is key for younger individuals who want to achieve financial stability and possibly even go beyond what their predecessors were able to accomplish. If it feels like you're running a marathon with your feet tied down, you're not the only one, but you're also not without options. Learning more, adjusting to the times, and taking action are essential steps to start changing your path. So begin today by making smarter decisions about your finances, your routines, and your goals. Share this video with someone who needs this. Message and subscribe to the channel to keep learning how to thrive, even when times are tough. The road is more challenging now, but with the right strategy, it's still possible.